Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again and welcome back to yet another starter builds video. This time around we are starting in 3.0, the new Fall of Oriath expansion in the Harbinger League. As always, I'm going to go ahead and make a disclaimer that these are starter builds. They're not necessarily the greatest things in the endgame, not even maybe the most fun builds in the game. They're somewhat basic and just good, strong skills with builds that will take you through the early game to mid and end game. Some of them can scale all the way through the end game, but the idea here is that they're cheap, quick, and can start you off in the new league without really any necessary gear, while still maintaining a decent level of fun because the character isn't that weak. These will not be full guides, though some full guides are already available on my YouTube channel for such builds. These will mostly just be little overviews, a snapshot of what the skill looks like, what supports you're supposed to use, and then perhaps some idea of how to traverse the passive tree, as well as what gear you're going to use, and all of this will be shown through Path of Building program, which does show you your passive tree, your damage calculations, as well as all of the gear you can use. So with all that said, the first character I'd like to recommend is the Scorching Ray Trickster. Now, if you've been following the channel for a few weeks, you would know that I have played a Scorching Ray Scion on the beta, and it worked out really well, and I still absolutely recommend it. But at this point, Trickster got a slight buff, and it looks like it should be the better Scorching Ray character. Overall, though there's nothing wrong with Scion, and it's still a great character. What Scorching Ray does is fire a big, thick beam across the map, and you rotate around at a certain speed while burning enemies, stacking a burning debuff. Scorching Ray just does a damage over time, which is purely fire damage, considered a burn, and more cast speed for the skill then lets you rotate around faster and burn things, as well as stacking your burns faster. The burn debuff can stack up to 8 times, so the longer you stack onto something, the more damage it will do, up to a maximum of 8 stacks, and then you try and maintain those 8 stacks on the single enemy for maximum damage, and it does have a duration to which it will expire on, so you have to try and increase your duration a bit while also increasing your damage and cast speed, thus maximizing your damage with Scorching Ray. I've already done a full video on this guy, so feel free to check that out for a video guide, but the general playstyle of this character is shield charge around with much better movement speed and attack speed than this, drop an Orb of Storms, which then gives you Elemental Equilibrium and Elemental Overload. Elemental Equilibrium being here, Elemental Overload being here. Both are going to be huge damage multipliers, and Orb of Storms is very important for that, so the playstyle is typically to drop your Orb of Storms and then do your damage. Now, it's a very regen based character, so as you can see I'm taking some damage, but I have a lot of life regen, so you do have quite a lot of survivability in that sense, and as well as that, we are utilizing Mind over Matter over here, which means some of the damage you take to your life will go to mana instead. So you stack a lot of life regen, stack a lot of mana regen, ends up being a very tanky character with a lot of damage that has potential to clear the end game, and should be pretty fun if you're into this sort of playstyle, which for me worked out great. The Trickster version of this character should be a lot faster and maybe even more tanky overall, whereas the Scion version just simply lets you travel around the passive tree a bit better and focus on some Inquisitor regen as well, which at this point doesn't seem too necessary when you can go full Trickster instead. Now, I have fired up a full Trickster tree for you guys instead of the Scion one, but I'll link the Scion one as well, and the tree pretty much builds itself as you level. You start in the shadow area grabbing the Ellie nodes, probably filling out everything up to here, and then the life nodes, and then traverse over to these life nodes, and then grab these life nodes here, and then I'd say probably grab Elemental Equilibrium, because that is a big damage boost with your Orb of Storms, and then also Elemental Overload. From there, it's kind of up to you guys. I'd probably go down to the Templar area, because it also has good life. Otherwise, you can go up and get your second curse, start filling out damage or life as you see fit. Now, you don't get Scorching Ray until level 12, and before then you can probably level with just about anything, Fire Trap, Ethereal Knives, whatever. Once you get it at level 12, it doesn't feel too amazing, but then eventually when you get to level 18 and finish halfway through Act 2, you get a few support gems for it. Now, the support gems you'll start out with are Ellie, Focus, and Control Destruction. Get that on your 3-link, and that's when your damage really starts to take off and Scorching Ray starts to feel amazing to level with. Beyond that, your 4th link is probably burning damage, and then the 5th link is up to you entirely whether you want to go efficacy or faster casting. because faster casting helps with your turn rate and your stacks, and it is a very good quality of life, especially during mapping, but efficacy will do a lot more damage for you. And then your sixth link is most likely Swift Demise. Get Mind Over Matter whenever you feel it's necessary and when you have a decent amount of mana unreserved to go with, and also you need to be fitting in 2 Blasphemies and a Clarity, so you won't really have a lot of mana unreserved until the higher levels, unless you're not running one of your Blasphemies just to leave a bit of extra mana unreserved. Try to get these duration nodes because they are, once again, quality of life for your build, and just fill out life and mana as you see fit. It is a bit customizable, so play around with it and try and get it working for you in your own best way. As far as items are concerned, your best in slot is pretty much going to be a Doriani's Catalyst. You grab a shield with some life, cast speed, spell damage if you can get that. A Marble Amulet will go great, otherwise just some good stats will be there. And the gear is very straightforward. You're just going for life, maybe some mana and some mana regen, and then try and fill out resists everywhere you possibly can as well. You'll probably want a Sulfur Flask to drop Consecrated Ground because it is a large amount of regen. As you can see here, we have 1100 life regen. That's a lot from Consecrated Ground, so you take it off, it's about half of our regen there. So with Consecrated Ground and all of our other regen, you end up having about, where is it, 23%, I think, 24% life regen, which is pretty damn huge at this stage, and you should hit about 5 to 6k life with all of your items comfortably. The rest of your flasks are kind of entirely up to you. I would say a Silver and a Quicksilver go really nicely for the playstyle, and then your actual skills themselves, you want a Blasphemy with Flammability and Vulnerability in the end, as well as an Enlighten level 3. Your Orb of Storms should have Arcane Surge of a fairly low level, so it procs a lot. Increased crit strikes to help for your Ellie Overload. Shield Charge will have faster attacks and Fortify. Run a Clarity, and probably run a Stone Golem for extra regen as well. And then to focus on the Trickster side of things, the first nodes you'd grab are probably Swift Killer because it helps you maintain Frenzy and Power Charges at all times except for a single target, but this will be huge for your damage and cast and attack speed. After that, probably Patient Reaper. That is a huge amount of regen as well as a bit of damage over time. And then it's up to you which one of these you'd grab, I think. Maybe Walk the Ether just for some faster dashing around or shield charging, and then probably Weave the Arcane. It's kind of up to you guys. You could even go all the way over here if you want some extra defense for some reason, but I think these are the best ones to take for the build. The next character I'd like to recommend is the Sunder or Cyclone plus Ancestral Warchief Duelist Slayer. So the idea here is to become a Slayer because it has some really good benefits for both Sunder, Cyclone, and Warchief. So giving plenty of good benefits for a two-handed build. You'll probably be using two-handed axes, and the point of the build is it's a really strong starter with very little gear required to be any good. Take no note of the current gear on this character, it's just a standard placeholder. But the idea is you'll have either Cyclone or Sunder. Sunder to start with at level 12, and Cyclone a bit higher up, with Ancestral Warchief to help for single target and larger packs. Now Cyclone just recently is about to get buffed on 3.0 so that it doesn't really collide as much with sort of objects. So previously you pretty much run into anything and stop immediately. When you get onto 3.0 with Cyclone, it's going to be able to go around things a lot easier while spinning, so it's something worth trying if you've always been a bit of a fan of Cyclone and Whirlwind. While Sunder, as we know, is a really good leveling skill and just amazing to start with, so you'll use this up until you get Cyclone. And the playstyle should be very simple here. You just charge at things, start cycloning them, and just run straight through them for the most part. The build scales really nicely off of very little gear and is an overall pretty fast playstyle in the end. For tougher packs, you'll drop your Warchief Totem, who helps out by attacking as well and helping out on single target damage. If you want to be pure Sunder, however, this is what you're going to be doing, slamming down these sort of shockwaves that cause little explosions to the sides and does some pretty good damage as well. This build is one I tried out on beta as my very first character for the 3.0 beta, and it went really well. Cyclone took care of just about all the content I threw it at with almost no gear whatsoever, the worst weapons you could have ever seen, and it went really well, and it should be able to take you all the way through to mid-tier, maybe even high-tier maps if you keep scaling the gear appropriately. So there honestly is not too much to a character like this. It's something I recommend just about every single league because it's always a solid starter that'll get you through the game without much gear or effort. You start out as a duelist and you just grab whatever fizz nodes you can along the tree and go straight down to Wrecking Ball immediately. It's plenty of life already. Then you get over to the Marauder side of things, plenty of life and damage to grab here, and then you'll probably go up to the Templar area to start getting a bit of area. Try and avoid getting too many specific nodes like the axe nodes and these over here, because you don't know what kind of weapon you'll be finding or using initially, and you can also spec into swords, for example, if you want to play pure Cyclone and do some stuff over here, but this is generally going to be better with an axe, I think. Something like a very good starter weapon is a Comb's Primacy here. They're basically free and they're pretty good as just a starter weapon. Your Ascendancy down here, you'll grab Bane of Legends first. It's very useful for the onslaught and then the cull that it gives, and then you grab Headsman, which is good for your reflect and a bit more damage and a bit more area. Once you can, you grab Endless Hunger and Brutal Fervor, and that lets you leech much better with your Blood Rage, and thus your survivability goes through the roof. And these sorts of nodes also start enabling you to use melee damage on full life, which is actually supposedly changed to just damage on full life at this point. In any case, it is melee damage on full life for us, so it's another huge multiplier, and it makes your Cyclone and Sunder damage quite a lot stronger on Slayer, because not every other character can have such effective full life capabilities as a Slayer does. So you start out as Sunder, and if you want to keep Sunder, then by all means do so all the way. You'll have Sunder probably into melee fizz and faster attacks and added fire. That's generally going to be your 4-link, and then you'll go into multi-strike, probably replacing, I'd say, faster attacks as soon as you can, and then you can go into melee damage on full life and ruthless once you can into your 5 and 6 link. If you want, use faster attacks as well, or increased area and conk effect. Play around with what you like most for your Sunder there. If you want to though, at level 28 you swap into Cyclone, at which point you'll probably be using melee fizz, added fire, and I'd say ruthless. And then you can try to use increased area or faster attacks or melee damage on full life as your 5th and 6th link, and subbing in conk effect over area for your big single target damage. At the same time, you grab Ancestral War Chief, and getting him on a 4-link is pretty damn huge for the build, so try and get Ancestral War Chief attached to melee fizz, added fire, and conk effect, and then your 5th and 6th link, ruthless and melee damage on full life are what you're looking for. Leap Slam is your travel skill of choice. You'll have Maim, which debuffs the enemies for good additional physical damage taken. You'll attach faster attacks, and this is supposed to be Fortify, so that's how you keep up your Fortify in this sort of build. Hatred and Herald of Ash are your 2 reservations, and there's not really much else to say. Items, they're very generic. Lion's Roar, if you can get one, is good. Your Jewel, for example, should probably just have damage, and maybe some attack speed. They're pretty straightforward to get. You should get at least a 3 prop across the board for all your jewels. They're very easy to get and cheap. The rest of the gear is typically armor-based sort of stuff. Try and get max movement speed on your boots. Armor-based, life, resists. If you can get some on your ring, some physical damage, and amulet physical damage, that would go a long way. Maybe even some weapon elemental damage, since we have Hatred and Herald of Ash. And once you can get Resolute Technique, it's usually around level 60 or 70 that you're gonna start needing it, because you'll notice that you're missing a lot of things by then. That's about all there is for this character. It's very straightforward. Just give Cyclone a test if you want, and it'll get you through Act 1 to 10 just to try out the story mode fairly comfortably and smoothly. The next character I want to show, and the one I'm most likely starting with myself, is the full conversion into Elemental Blade Vortex Inquisitor. So originally, Blade Vortex is a full physical spell. You convert it into 100% elemental on this build specifically by using Physical to Lightning and Hrimsara Gloves, and you're using an Inquisitor to ignore elemental enemy elemental resistances, thus giving you a lot of effective damage. Now, the only problem with this build as a starter is you don't get Blade Vortex to start with as a Templar, so you'll have to complete the library in Act 3 over here, and that's when you can get all of your support gems and fresh well, any sort of skill gems. So you buy a Blade Vortex at that point, start leveling, and go from there. Up until that point, you'll probably be Spark or Stormcall or Firestorm or some generic spell, because you get plenty of additional spell damage to start with and level with, and it should be fairly smooth until then, but you don't actually get Blade Vortex until about level 30, unless you buy it from someone else, which is very much an option, and I'll probably try and do that. So make sure you have a few friends and you grab a Blade Vortex at level 12 from a friend, I would recommend. The character itself though, and its playstyle, is standing around and winding up Blade Vortexes. So Blade Vortex functions in that you wind up a single Blade Vortex stack. It lasts at a base of 5 seconds, and then you can get up to 20 stacks, and you just run at enemies and they get caught in the Blade Vortex and hopefully die as so. So it hits really hard, and it's a pretty nice play style. For some people it might be a bit too boring, but I've always found it rather enjoyable. You try and scale a lot of crit, spell damage, elemental damage, some cast speed, and hopefully a bit of duration so that you can get up to 20 stacks easier and maintain them while mapping. You shield charge around for some additional fortify action, and you have an Orb of Storms to proc Arcane Surge for you, as well as using a Flame Dash just to travel and jump over certain little humps and bumps along the way. The Orb of Storm setup also serves to function as a power charge on crit generator, so you attach power charge on crit to it, and that's how you get your power charges. And ultimately, when you feel comfortable enough on the character, you can probably run Blood Rage as well for frenzies and faster attack speeds so that you can charge a bit faster to your next target. You run Hatred for a bunch of extra physical converted or additional into cold, as well as a Blasphemy Warlord's Mark, because that's where you get your Life Leech and your Mana Leech from for this sort of build, which doesn't leave you with too much mana unreserved at that point. So run a Mana Flask for as long as you need to. And I did do a good little video about this one, basically as a full guide, just about a week ago or so, and as should become obvious to you as you start playing Blade Vortex, it is an insanely good boss killing skill, because before you go in for a boss fight, you can stack up your Blade Vortexes to maximum and then dive in and shit on the boss immediately. We use Vile Clarity, since we don't have much mana and mana regen, to then allow us to stack up 20 times before you go in at a boss, and it should make for a very easy boss killing and single target, especially when using Conk effect in your setup instead of increased area. As I mentioned, I have made a full sort of build and video guide for this character already, but I will go over some of it real quick. You do grab a Lyra as soon as you can as your bandit for crit multi, res, and mana regen, and it's got a lot of single target damage off pretty humble gear and setup to begin with. So it's a fairly straightforward character in the end, just like all these starters are. You start as a Templar, you probably grab just about all of this except for this over here, I'd say, then go straight over here, then go to the witch area and start grabbing crit, some area, and then go down to the shadow and start filling out this crit, and then this crit here. Grab these life nodes whenever you feel necessary, and these in duration nodes probably by about level 20 to 30, and yeah, just get as much life as you feel you need to while you level. Now initially I did want to get Mind Over Matter, but I couldn't possibly justify it in the setup I'm running with my reservation, so if you want to try and fit that in, especially with the Pledge of Hands, it is something you can do. The gear itself is not too complicated. You're going for, once again, either a Doriani's Catalyst or just a good spell crit dagger with attack speed on it, a shield with life and spell damage and crit. You can go any sort of generic chest with life, resists, and all that, but a Carcass Jack or an Incandescent Heart are really good uniques you can go for if you'd like to do that. Hrimburn or Hrim Sorrow, absolutely essential for the conversion, and then your rings and amulets. Just try and get some cast speed, crit multi on your amulets, some life and mana and resists on your rings, and Belt of Deceive is a good starting point, but get a huge life belt as soon as you can. The two flasks that you want to run are Taste of Hate and its Series Promise, and then anything else is up to you. Taste of Hate is pretty much the only expensive item on the build that you want to shoot towards, but it's not necessary until later in the game. And then of course your jewels can be amazing for the build, but don't expect to get anything this good. You're looking mostly for crit multi, spell crit multi, and some spell damage. And your progression ascendancy-wise should probably be Righteous Providence into Inevitable Judgment, into Instruments of Virtue, and then Augury of Penitence. And the skills you're looking for and links are Blade Vortex. You'll then probably pick up Added Fire to level with, and then potentially Faster Casting, Controlled Destruction, or Fizz to Lightning immediately. You kind of can play around with these as much as you want. There are no staple 4-link, 5-link, 6-link you have to do. Spell Echo is a huge quality of life while leveling as soon as you can get it. Area, you won't really feel until late game, I don't think. Crit Strikes, you won't really feel until late game. So it's kind of entirely up to you guys what you play around with when you first get Blade Vortex. Like I said, Orb of Storms is Arcane Surge, Orb of Storms, Crit Strikes and Power Charge on crit. And for this character, that's about all I need to say, I think. Next up is yet another character I've already done a guide on quite recently, is the Frostblade Raider. Full dual wield, I guess, swords, claws, or whatever, physical converted into cold. So Frostblades is a skill that's half melee, half projectile. I go over a lot of that in the guide, so if you're interested in this and need more info, I do recommend checking out the video guide I've already done for it. 60% of its physical damage is converted to cold, and then you convert the other 40% to cold through Winter Spirit, so that's one of the passives you get very early on. So you are 100% cold in this sort of build, and the playstyle is simply dashing around with your Whirling Blades, and then right-clicking your Frostblades onto enemies. So it then hits with an initial projectile, or initial melee hit, and then fires off a bunch of projectiles behind the enemy, that then hit other enemies. You can use Chain in a build like this, you can use Fork, you can use Pierce, I suppose, but for me, most effectively, it seems to just be nothing at all, just a plain hit with lots of damage and fast attack speed, though Chain with Touch of Anguish unique claws is very effective as well. It's a fast playstyle, it doesn't require too much specific gear, and I think it has potential to scale into solid endgame as well. Now, as I said, I do have a full video guide about this sort of character, but to sum it up, you do start out as a ranger and then go into raider passives. The first 4 ascendancies you're taking are probably these frenzy ones, and then these phasing ones that do give a good amount of damage and survivability through immune to elemental ailments while phasing. You end up having something like 7 or 8 frenzies on this character, so you do take most of the frenzies on the tree as you can and as you get to them, and as well as that you do run 2 Fight for Survival jewels, which can now be gotten through about halfway through Act 5. Someone will offer you one of these when you do a quest, and it means that it should be a lot easier to start this character out as of this point, because these jewels are a pretty big deal. They give you a large amount of additional cold penetration to the melee hit, which is where your single target is coming from. When you start out this character, you'll probably go somewhere through here, grab this conversion here, and I would probably at this point then recommend going through the life, grabbing these Ellie nodes down here, and then going up to the shadow area because it has some good life. You grab the frenzies, you grab those frenzies, and then you can finish off a bunch of life there, and then eventually get down to the duelist when you're ready to get some life leech and mana leech and get your Fight for Survival jewels happening. Point blank is fairly useful because the projectiles will get point blank buffed behind the initial melee hit and thus do a lot of extra damage, and you try and get all of these additional cold and Ellie penetration nodes across the tree, which end up being a rather big deal for the character, as well as the Wise Oak Flask is a big boost to our cold damage as well. The ideal 6-link is listed over here, though it's probably going to be better these days with a Ice Bite at this point, so you quite likely use an Ice Bite, maybe even instead of Melee Fizz. Play around with it yourself, but as far as optimal setups are concerned, there's a pretty good chance you would rather use Ice Bite than one of these other gems. And in the early game, you probably want to go with Cold Penetration as well, since you won't really have too much cold penetration. You probably won't have a Wise Oak. Until you get it ramped, you definitely want some cold penetration from your gem as well. You'll most likely be running Hatred and then Herald of Ice, and eventually you'll probably drop Herald of Ice and grab a Frostbite Blasphemy instead, or you can just always curse your Frostbite whenever you actually want to use it, single target by itself. Frostbomb is pretty damn good to have as well. You place it underneath the target for single target, and then they get 20 minus cold resist as well as that. So then the items are all listed over here. here in the path of building link, which I will give you. Ideally, I think this character builds into 2 dream feathers, though you can go many other different ways, and then you stack plenty of evasion. So in the end, you have something like 40 to 50,000 evasion. You get plenty of additional damage from the dream feathers, and they also convert into cold, and thus you get lots of damage in the end from that too. A Lion's Roar, a Wise Oak, a Taste of Hate, they're all really good, but not at all necessary for the build. It's just some end game goals that you try and build into. And then ideally you're looking for physical damage on jewelry with weapon elemental damage as well as that. Otherwise, life, maybe. Actually, no, you don't need accuracy at all. Just life and resists across the board everywhere else. The character has a very fast playstyle, and I do recommend giving this one a shot if you've never tried Frostblades out before. The only other thing to mention is you probably want an Ancestral Protector down as your totem of choice. You don't really have to buff him too much, but as long as you keep him down, he does give you a lot of additional attack speed to the build as well. And the last thing I wanted to share with you guys was my, I guess, provisional Stormburst passive tree. So Stormburst is going to be this new skill that we've already had a look at, and it's quite likely what I want to try first. So I'm going to make a Stormburst Inquisitor passive tree, and if that fails and sucks ass because the skill sucks or I sucked at building it, then I will probably convert it into the Blade Vortex character that I showed just before. So I'll show you guys the passive tree for that, and if you want to try out Stormburst as well, then by all means go ahead, or you can build it as an Elementalist as well. So this will be the only build I'm not too sure of, and it's just something you can experiment with just like I will as the league starts if you really want to. Historically, skills are either released undertuned or overtuned, so if they're overtuned, you want to get on them as soon as possible and you know, try it out, have a lot of fun with it before they get completely nerfed, which is very likely to happen if it's too strong, like a Blade Flurry was, for example, when it was released. I just converted the entire Inquisitor Blade Vortex tree into a Stormburst sort of tree, so we've just gotten rid of a few nodes that we don't need anymore for physical damage and all that, and instead replaced them with a few extra lightning ones, and probably a bit low on life. Maybe you can go for more if you think you need to. Otherwise, it's all pretty much the exact same. You just want crit, you want a bit of area, a little bit of projectile damage, and otherwise it's all the same sort of shit. We change around our gem a bit, so it's Stormburst. I'm really not sure what we're going to be using here. I assume Echo, probably Crit Strikes, maybe GMP, we'll have to play around with that as well. Added Lightning could see some use, Innovate could see some use, Area or Conk, Ellie Focus if you go for pure single target. So it's something we're going to have to play around with a lot, but the core principles should be roughly the same as the Blade Vortex, just without having to swap any conversion, so you do free up your gear a bit for other things. Once again, Orb of Storms, Arcane Surge, Power Charge on crit should be a staple. Instead of Hatred, I think we're going to run Wrath. Quite possibly we'll run a Herald of Ice instead of a Blasphemy, so look out for that as well. But I think it should be a fun skill, and one we can definitely sink our teeth into. Whether it'll be good or not is an entirely another story, and something I'll play around with. Like I said, the fallback plan will of course be Blade Vortex, as I can already attest to this build, most likely going to be able to clear everything, but as a good starter already. So we'll see how we go with that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, hope it helped you pick something or just made you even more indecisive. I tried to make it as friendly as possible for new players as well, so tell your friends if you think they could benefit from this sort of video. As always though, thank you very much for watching guys, see you in 3.0, hopefully it's a smooth launch, and I'll see you next time.